Need a job? Well, 94 million Americans have given up looking. I'm Dan Perkins.
It's time Donald Trump came home to the Republican Party. I'm Don Mazzella, and we'll be back.
It's time for Two Guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings. We start off each program with Dan Perkins' essay on what he considers an important issue facing us.
Well, Don, we need to remind people to go to twoguysfromverona.com because we've done some changes on the website, made it a little more brighter, a little more colorful, and starting to add more content. So if you get a minute sometime during the next week or so, go visit us at twoguysfromverona.com. Unemployment or employment, depending on your perspective. This is a tough piece to do, Don, because there are a number of numbers, and sometimes people get lost when they hear the numbers. So I'll do my best, but numbers are important, especially when it comes to jobs. Last Friday, we got the jobs number, and the consensus before the Friday morning announcement was about 220,000 new jobs. And in fact, Goldman Sachs came out on Thursday afternoon and said they thought that the street was wrong. It's going to be closer to 250. One of the rare times that Goldman Sachs is wrong, not only were they wrong ugly. It came in at about 160,000, so way below expectation. That sent the bond market reeling, and the futures markets about what the direction of interest rates are going to be also changed dramatically. Now the short-term Treasury futures are now pointing to only a 35% chance that the Fed will raise interest rates by December of 2016. On top of that, we had an all-time high number of people looking for work or underemployed or have lost all of their unemployment benefits. 94.4 million people. And the third statistic, Don, is, if your eyes haven't glazed over, is the participation rate, meaning what percentage of the eligible workforce in the country is working today. And that's at a new low of 62.7%. One other statistic, and that is, in the time that Obama has been president, his administration claims that they have produced 8.7 million new jobs. However, what the administration is not telling you, in that same period of time, they've also lost 14 million jobs. So we are down a net 6 million people not working. It's really tough to get a job, and yet we are told that 5% unemployment is near full employment when we've got tens of millions of people looking for work and people working two jobs because corporations don't want to pay the Obamacare premium and they're working less than 29 hours in a week. It's a real big problem. And until we get people back to work, we're going to get deeper and deeper in debt. In fact, Don, the president and Speaker of the House Ryan and Mitch McConnell from the Senate negotiated a deal last year at the end of the year called the Omnibus Spending Bill. And it was a tax bill to clean up what they had not passed during the year. That in the first 6 months that bill was passed and signed into law, the federal debt is up $1 trillion in 6 months. We have an economy with no direction, corporations not interested in hiring, and money's cheap and they still don't want to hire, and a government that puts us deeper and deeper in debt every day. Don.
You're right about the statistic. Might cause listeners' eyes to glaze over, but I look at it a little bit differently, and I agree with you on all these points. I saw one that came across the wire The number of job openings are up according to the Department of Labor, but the number of jobs filled has actually declined in the last month. So, um, uh, John Cradell, who writes for the New York Post, among others, points out, figures never lie, but liars always figure. And that's what we seem to be getting out of the government these days. The economy is bad. Things are happening or not happening, and people are concerned. It's the perfect opening for Donald Trump, and he saw the opportunity and drove for the goal line. But whoever's in power or gets elected come November, he or she will have a major job in front of them. They'll have a domestic problem and they'll have a foreign problem, and we'll talk about it later on.
Right.
But figures, if people listen closely, are scary, and they're going to get scarier in the coming months. I'll go back to you now.
Yeah, following up what you were saying about being scared, the average household income during the Obama administration has actually gone down something like $3,500 since he became president. I heard Hillary say recently at a campaign stop that America needs a raise. America's needed a raise for 8 years. And we have spent billions and trillions of dollars, and we've not made any progress moving forward as far as the people looking for work. The other thing is that students are graduating from college in the next couple of months are going to find it very difficult. The unemployment rate for college graduates is very, very high, higher than the national average, and in some cases approaching the unemployment for black people.
Interesting. Well, let me interrupt you here.
Sure.
Interesting. The media is not following you on that. The articles today were saying how good the job prospects are for the June graduates. I couldn't see that in any of the figures that I've seen, but they seem to be painting a Pollyanna picture for June graduates. So I did a little survey with the help of some friends, and of the 100 people that were graduating, only 31 had jobs as of last night. It's a sad situation because usually college grads have at least a promise of employment, but most of them did not. Back to you.
Yeah.
Didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, and I think that there's perhaps some pandering there, Don, because Hillary's talking about free college for everybody, and she's trying to appeal to the millennials who don't seem to like her but like Bernie much better. By the way, I did see that before we came on the air tonight that Trump won in West Virginia and Bernie won in West Virginia. Important and really an important situation because West Virginia being a major coal state would indicate that the labor unions, the United Mine Workers, didn't come out and support Hillary to the tune that everybody expected. So I think there's a lot of people trying to shore up what's going on, and I think the longer that Bernie stays in the race, the more difficult it's going to be for Hillary to try and attract the millennials that Bernie has gone after. And one of the things he's talking about is jobs for college graduates and making college tuition free. All the right all the right communist things to say to convince people to follow him. But I really do believe. What are you laughing at there, bud?
Well, go ahead, keep going.
You don't like that little shot at Bernie, the communist way?
Well, no, I was going to ask you to tell what you heard on Rush Limbaugh today from the woman from Michigan.
Yeah,
what she called Mrs. Clinton.
He called Hillary. Hillary. That was her name, and their reaction to the polling data that came out for Florida Ohio and Pennsylvania, where Hillary and Donald are dead even, except I think Donald is actually up in Florida by 2 or 3 points outside the margin of error. But the point is that the Trump's message to the young people is, I want you to be able to graduate with college and have 3 or 4 or 5 job offers, not to go out and like, as you said, 70% not finding employment. I think we have an economy and a group of people that has forgotten how to work. And with that, sir, we need to take a break to hear from our commercials, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
You know, Dan, we're reaching the point in the primary campaign where one or both nominees have to start bringing their party together under one tent. Now, right now, Donald Trump is running roughshod over everybody and doing a good job of sewing up the nomination, though I still think there's still 1 or 2 twists in this primary campaign. But assuming that Donald Trump, as you and many other people hope, will be the nominee, he's got to stop the rhetoric right now and start pulling together the elements of the Republican Party. I know there's a lot of conservatives that are disenchanted with the leadership of the party. Some people are disenchanted with Representative Ryan. I've known him for now 10 or almost 15 years, and I don't think there's a better politician person in Washington than him. I happen to have a personal bias, but he's finally said he's reaching out and saying he'll do whatever Donald Trump wants, and Donald Trump's got to tone down his attacks and bring the party together under one tent and leadership. Because don't forget, there's not only the presidency at stake, there's control of the Senate, because most of the senators up for re-election are Republican, or where they've given up seats in Republican territories. There's the House to consider, though I don't think that's as much in danger as Ryan will have you believe. And there is an enemy, not to use the best word, in the Democratic Party that's got to be vanquished. Because otherwise, we'll be saddled with 4 or 8 years or more of Democratic rule. So Donald Trump has got to turn the victory. He's got to learn what Julius Caesar learned and what Augustus learned as emperors, that you bring everybody in under and make them feel they're part of the solution. I always recommend people read Tacitus, the Annuals of Tacitus, because it talks about how the change from the Republican Rome to the Imperial Rome. But in it, he describes what Augustus did to pacify and change. And now that Donald Trump has won that, I strongly urge him and the Republican kingmakers as well that they've got to unite together to victory. If they don't, you're going to see the Democratic nominee somehow or other waltz off this littered battlefield that you talk about. You've done a tremendous job of pointing out all that's wrong. But now the people have got to decide we're all in this together and we've got to move forward. That's my thought.
Well, on a rare occasion in our long relationship, there are not many times that I respectfully disagree with you, but I'm going to take a little shot at some of the things you said. Did you hear that Cruz said tonight that he might re-enter the race if he wins Nebraska? How's he going to win Nebraska if he's no longer campaigning? And what person in Nebraska is going to vote for a person who dropped out of the race? So one has to wonder what's in his mind.
Let me interrupt you there. Remember, Cruz has always been in his own world. And
Planet.
again, I think that demonstrates how much he's in his own world.
Okay, that's fair. Um, the Most people don't understand the Republican convention process, Don. It was very important to Trump that he be the presumptive nominee before day one of the convention. Because if he had the 1,237 votes by the end of the California primary, the convention takes on a totally different posture. The Trump people are now in charge. They're going to be the people responsible for making the decision for some of the committee chairs. They're going to be responsible for the running of the convention, even though Ryan may be the chair, or at least for some period of time. Donald's already told the Republican Party he plans to make a speech as he works his way to the convention every night that will be broadcast. He thinks that there should be more theater, much like President Obama when he first ran and when he accepted the nomination in Grant Park with the Roman columns and all that stuff. I'm not sure Trump will do that, but it will be not quite as stodgy as Republicans have been in the past. Number 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, I listened today on Rush talk about how the Democrats are very concerned that Mr. Trump is not following the Democratic playbook from the last 30 years. The Democratic playbook says that or in this case, Hillary, she speaks and Mr. Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will agree or acquiesce, or they won't fight, they won't argue. All the things we talked about in the past when we talked about John McCain when he was running against Obama and Mitt Romney when he was. Why did he miss the opportunities? Why did he not take the opportunities to land a death blow on Obama? Because he didn't want to, because it wasn't allowed in the Democratic playbook. Trump is not playing by the Democratic playbook. I find it personally reprehensible that the Speaker of the House would make any comment about his support, one way or the other, about the nominee until we get to the convention. These people who are part of the Washington elite, who are trying to still maintain control of the Republican Party, don't understand that there's been a fundamental shift and change in the Republican Party, and it's being driven by the people outside of Washington, not the people inside of Washington. So yes, I guess I agree with you that Donald should be bringing people, as many people as he can, into the tent. But where are they going to go? Are they going to go to Hillary? Maybe. Do we have to be concerned that Hillary's, I have to do that myself. Hillary, I like that. That Hillary's going to wind up having very long coattails. It's going to change the Senate or is going to change the House. I don't really see that. If we're talking about an extremely close vote, and it may not be, but it could be, with an extremely close vote, I don't think coattails are going to have impact at all. In fact, I believe that the Republicans may, in fact, win all the Republican seats that they need and pick up some Democratic seats in both the House and the Senate. They'll have a greater control. They'll get to the supermajority in the Senate. I think there are a lot of people who are Democrats who are reluctant at the moment to admit this could be a real barn burner of a race.
Well, believe it or not, a lot of Democrats are coming to that. Because if Hillary, as the presumptive leader, cannot carry 3 states tonight, she's already lost 1, you sit there and wonder. And yes, you're right, she doesn't have coattails. But remember, all politics are local. And the Republican Party has done a magnificent job, some people argue, or a horrible job if you're a Democrat, of becoming dominant majorities in a lot of states and a lot of local districts. And Donald thinks that Trump thinks that he can win by being on television, etc. When it comes down to it, you still have to get out the vote, and you still have to tell the people. Look, Chris Christie is his transition leader. Mm-hmm. He's already nominated him. Chris Christie couldn't get elected dog catcher in New Jersey. And interestingly enough, a recent survey by the Democrats here in the state surprised them of how strong this support is for Donald Trump in the state. Mm-hmm. But it's a really interesting. Hillary Clinton, if she's the nominee, has got an upward road to take. Donald Trump has a road to run, but I believe at this point his road has got to be to smooth out all of the negativism that's involved. I think that I'm hearing
music. It's time to take a break.
It is.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, Don, segment 3, I want to talk about what happened over the weekend in Saudi Arabia. The major shakeup of the Saudi cabinet and the and consolidation and changing of ministers. More specifically, the head of the oil minister from Saudi Arabia was replaced by a younger man, and several other key officials from the previous regime, the previous king, were replaced. And now what we're seeing, the backlash to that came this afternoon from one of Putin's closest allies in the oil business in Russia, saying that he believes that the position that Saudi Arabia is taking is going to mean the end of OPEC. You have spoken in the past about what's going on with Venezuela, and I mentioned to you recently that if we look at what's going on and we describe what's going on in Venezuela, we could change the name of the capital and we could go to Nigeria, and it's the same thing going on there. The power is being turned off. There isn't enough fuel to generate electricity. There's a shortage of all kinds of things because the revenue is not there. The Russians see that there's a breakup coming in OPEC where the lesser nations are being literally destroyed by what Saudi Arabia wants. So the new head of the oil ministry is saying that he wants the free market to ultimately decide what the price of crude oil is going to be. Now, that's a very interesting concept because for almost 40 years, Saudi Arabia has controlled what the price of crude oil was going to be. For them to say that it's now a free market decision reinforces their belief that the cartel cannot survive longer term because lower oil prices will mean significant declines in revenue, and lack of revenue means that the countries cannot survive in their current state. I fully expect that Venezuela will declare bankruptcy if they can under their laws by the end of the year. It's not going to happen. So then we have a situation where Saudi Arabia has in essence abandoned the United States because they believe that they have been mistreated dramatically by the President of the United States in his unbelievable support for Iran over Saudi Arabia in the oil negotiations and the nuclear negotiations. When he was, and I think you mentioned it to me, Don, that the Saudis basically told President Obama, you tell the story, not coming unless he had done something. So why don't you fill us in on that story?
Okay. Well, basically, there's pending sales of warplanes to Qatar, three or four Gulf states, including, by the way, Saudi Arabia. And for some reason, the administration is holding up the approval of it. It's been approved by the Senate. They're bipartisan letters to the White House, and they won't release these advanced jets to the Middle East. There's no reason not to. In fact, there's a whole assembly line, I believe in St. Louis, I don't know where, that's remaining open only for this deal. The Saudis I'm told that Saudis said to the White House that if the deal wasn't approved, don't bother to come. Naturally, Obama ignored that, so they ignored him by doing exactly the same thing that Fidel Castro did and not meeting him at the airport. There's much to be said. There is an airport diplomacy, someone said to me recently, and it's akin to when do you greet someone, at your front door or in the dining room? And let's be frank about it. If you don't like your mother-in-law, you meet her in the dining room, not at the door. And that's what's happening. So the Saudis are very, very put out with the United States. They signaled it a year and a half ago. They've signaled it 3 or 4 times. And it's interesting you mentioned about the death of OPEC. It's like Mark Twain's death. I think it's greatly exaggerated. I think they're in trouble. And I agree with you, and you're, when it comes to oil, much more knowledgeable than I am, that we're seeing a reordering. But the real reordering will come when Russia can't sell its oil, and that's going to happen. Back to you.
Yeah, there was some discussion that when in the early part of this year, Russia was working very hard, supposedly with Saudi Arabia, to broker a deal to freeze production at the December 31st level. And they thought that they had a deal with the oil minister in Saudi Arabia. But when Iran said, no, we're not going to comply, we're going to continue to increase and pump more and more oil, that just blew the thing apart. And so while the lesser OPEC nations were encouraged that there might be an agreement that would impact positively the price of crude oil, which meant revenue to their countries, when it all fell apart, the price of oil backed off a little bit. So I look at it and say that this choosing of sides between Saudi Arabia and Iran has not been good for us, has not been good for the world, and is not going to be good for the Middle East. We could be finding ourselves in a confrontation between Iran and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. I was thinking about the planes that you just mentioned a few moments ago, Don. I wonder if any of that type of aircraft could be supplied, excuse me, could be supplied by Russia or, for that matter, the UK.
I can tell you the answer. There's the European Tornado jet, and there's the Russian jet. The Russians have a problem is they can't expand their production line quick enough to settle the order. The Europeans have rushed in and offered their equivalent fighter, the Tornado, to them. But there's another reason. Their systems are incompatible with the ground equipment, etc. The only planes that really fit in with, because we've sold so much of the infrastructure to these countries, that there's a certain incompatibility. The deal should go through, and again, it's what makes you wonder where the loyalty of President Obama lies. And I say that not so much tongue-in-cheek, as it's very dangerous to say it, because this is the deal that's good for the United States in terms of dollars, it's good in terms of production, and it's good for our allies. Yet, why hold it up? It is something that my sources, because this came out of a very fine story in the Wall Street Journal, which, by the way, the New York Times never even covered. It's really scaring the Defense Department in Washington. And let me just say something. It's my understanding. I can't confirm it. But a U.S. Destroyer came within 12 miles of the reef base that the Chinese are building in the South China Sea to extend its sovereignty. I'm told that this did not have the explicit approval of the White House. It was something accomplished at the highest levels, but no one seems to want to put their fingerprint on it. So that's another area we have to worry about. And go back to your oil thing. Don't forget, 50% of the Far East oil moves through the Straits of Hormuz.
Right.
And there is going to be a bottleneck there, because if Iran and Saudi Arabia escalate their fight, Iran will attempt to close the Straits of Hormuz, which are, as you know, international waters,
right,
which will bring the United States in conflict with it, because it is pledged to keep those straits open for its allies. That's another thing we have to worry about.
So we're done with this piece, so we're going to go to commercial, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Two Guys from
Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. They'll be right back after.
So the last cut is 8:49:00, or as close as we can get to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You got it.
This is the last
What are
segment.
we going
This is the fourth segment. And we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 minutes in this segment. So what are you going to talk about?
It's very interesting. The free press. Did you see how Twitter, the editors of Twitter's do not permit conservative or tidbits to be in their trends unless they're really forced to? It tells you a little bit about what lack of secondary editorial judgment does. I tell you, our free press is under extreme threats today, and it's not, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Is it the free press or the press bringing it on themselves?
All right, Phil.
Why don't you ask that question?
Yeah.
Here we go.
.com.
In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Well, Don, we're coming back to the last segment of the show. I wanted to share something that I heard today, and it fills in with what you were just talking about in the break. There's an organization called Facebook, social media, and they have a service that they provide on Facebook called News Feed. They have represented to the public and to the Facebook subscribers that they use a very sophisticated algorithm to determine what stories are trending so that they report them on Newsfeed. Well, today it was released that that's not quite true. Apparently, there is no algorithm at all. There are 20 recent college graduates, journalism majors who just sit around the table and decide what they think should go out in the news feed. So the service that they were providing, or thought that they were being provided, customers realize now it is the bias of those 20 young people who have very little life experience deciding what the trends are going to be in the news feed on Facebook, which is now being called Fake Book. So we were talking at the break about the influence of the media, and you said that you thought that the media was under tremendous pressure, and I said, from whom? Are they putting the pressure on themselves because they're caught in a bias situation as it relates to political and economic and social issues?
Well, I've been in this business a long time, and I go back to the time when Vice President Agnew, remember that name?
Spiro
Talked
T.
about and he talked about how the networks, in effect, controlled the news. Well, I was part of those networks at that time, and we all felt under attack. But we were also...
excuse me. You felt that you were under attack from Agnew? Or
from Agnew.
But you... Or
from Agnew.
Did you realize, did you believe that you were not controlling the news?
Well, I was going to get to that point.
Okay.
We at first blush, we thought to ourselves, of course we weren't. We're newsmen. We presented. Well, it was interesting. And I happened to sit in on meetings, or mostly at bars, where we talked about it and thrashed it out. And really good. Don't forget, in those days, before you could be on television news, you had to go out and do at least 5 years at a newspaper, which taught you a lot more about life than the ordinary citizen. That's not the case today. But anyway, they began to realize, yes, that was the case, that maybe we were, there was a concentration of power. It was Walter Cronkite and Huntley Brinkley. And then over time, we were supplanted by students who became journalists who didn't have the news experience. And then we saw a splintering as Fox News, etc., came into it. And for a while, we started to see kind of expansion of opinions. Someone said to me recently that a lot of the third Ross Perot, could probably be elected president if today, because he was a credible candidate then with a credible idea. And someone has argued that Donald Trump is the embodiment of Perot without the burden of a vice president. But to get up to the point, now we seem to have concentration of people like these 20 young people. By the way, they're not journalism majors. None of them at the table were journalism majors.
So my information is wrong.
No, your information. I'm just hearing this from someone else. And there is an algorithm, but all the algorithm did was spit out, here's the listing of what's going on, and then they chose from it. And you hit it right on the button. They're too young to really appreciate it. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get kickback from somebody, but I should tell you that I use interns all the time in my business with my stories, and I let them learn by doing, which is the only thing you can do. But none of them, none of the young people around that room ascribe to the basis, according to my information, that you present the facts and let the people choose. And that's what the hallmark of journalism was post World War II and post World War II. It's changed now, and right now we have, and I call it the second eye. Everything we did and everything I do still has a second eye editor looking at it. That's what we should have, but we don't have in case of Facebook and in case of a lot of other things. We need that second eye to really try to get a balance. We don't have it today.
Why do you think, Don, that we lost it?
Two reasons. One, for the Wall Street Journal, they wiped out an entire layer of copy editors at the Wall Street Journal, which I consider the best news source in the country. They wiped it out, and you can see the changes in the paper in terms of errors and in terms of balance. They're trying to redress it. It's interesting. There's a new round of layoffs going on in the New York Times, but I'm told, I can't verify it, that the one thing that's not being touched is the copy editor's desk, because good copy editors make great reporters because they catch what the reporters don't do. You need that second eye and everything, not only with news, but in everything. No one is perfect, and we need people to check up on us.
Do you think that people today are held to a different accountability standard than when you started in the business?
Oh, yeah. Brian Williams would have been fired in my generation. I've known people who were fired for far less offenses. Dan I know of two major on-air personalities in my generation who were fired for incorrect things. Let's put it that way. Involving, I mean, you could do a lot of things, beat up your mother, etc. But if you did a mistake on the air or did something deliberately wrong, you heard about it, and you suffered for it. Brian Williams, no matter what it got away with it. It's a different time. It's interesting. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you think there's a lot of people today who are on either radio or television, primarily in television, from what I understand, are not graduates of journalism schools. They are liberal arts degrees, but they're not journalism students. And I wonder.
They're communication students.
Communication
There's a difference.
Communication
There's a
majors.
difference.
What's the difference
between communications and journalists? Journalists in my day in journalism school and in my classes to this day, they went out and did the stories and had somebody look at them and bounce them back if they were bad. Mm-hmm. I've done the Columbia Journalism School program for high school students enough times that some of my high school kids are now in college or beyond. And what I've noticed is the real journalists are not in front of the camera; they're behind the camera, and they're pretty good. The ones that I felt would make it, but they would make it based solely on their looks, is surprisingly so. I wish they were as good as the journalists as they are as communicators. There's a difference between.
So the title, where we used to call them anchormen, now are news readers as opposed to anchormen or anchorwomen. They're news readers.
Absolutely. I was on a television program on Friday where the news reader versus the journalist was really in evidence. And you're absolutely right. The instincts you need. I will tell you this, Dan. You are a great journalist. You may not realize it, but you always ask the right questions, or you ask hard questions. And in today's world, our journalists are not asking the hard questions.
Do you think we've got just a little bit of time left, maybe a minute and a half? Let me ask you one more question, and then we'll sign off. In your era, in the peak of your era, were the network news programs as biased to the left as they are today?
No. Agnew complained about Chet Huntley's raised eyebrow, but the point was the journalists were there that I saw, and I saw them as a copy boy, and then as a newsman. They really tried to present the facts. They had just 15 minutes. Don't forget, Huntley Brinkley started at 15 minutes, and they had to present the news, and they did it. John Cameron Swayze presented news. They tried. When they went to a half hour, and then now to an hour, and now 24/7, we repeat, and we have video, etc. But in those days, the effort was to present the news. And they did it by and large. Of course, you're always biased because it's your time. I think they did a good job. I went to the News Museum recently and saw some of the old Huntley Brinkley shows that I was on. And I was surprised how much they got in. And don't forget, there were a lot less commercials.
Right.
In 15 minutes at Huntley Brinkley, there was just 3 minutes of commercials.
Wow.
Then it went to 5. So,
Okay.
anyway.
Well, we're out of time for tonight. So, Don, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for letting me go back memory lane.
You're welcome. This is Dan Perkins and
Don Mazzella.
thank you from Two Guys from Verona. Remember, go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com. And remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. And we'll talk to you next week.